You could tell from the keys. Not what anyone said, the keys. How they landed on the counter told you everything about the evening. You weren't difficult. You were doing threat assessment. Constant, automatic. Adults called it maturity. It wasn't. And once built, reading every room, removing yourself from it, it doesn't stay in your parents' house. It follows you into every room, even when there's nothing to be careful of. 5 things the easy child learned, including one every adult praised as a strength, that decide whether they grow up knowing who they are or spend their life performing someone they can't feel. Number 1, the specific fear. The fear wasn't vague. It was operational. Is this a good moment? Is she already at capacity? If I bring this up now, will his face do that thing? Is the house okay right now? Or is it one wrong move from not being okay? They would clock a parent's mood from the sound of the keys in the door. They weren't listening for, hi. They were listening for tone of key placement, which is not a normal childhood skill, unless your childhood hobby was emotional surveillance. The kitchen quiet that meant everything was fine versus the kitchen quiet that meant something was building. Those are 2 completely different silences, and they knew both by feel before they'd finished taking off their shoes. Most kids are learning maths at this age. They were learning people. One of those shows up on the tests. The other quietly runs your entire life. If you grew up like this, you're already nodding. You know exactly which quiet I mean. A sigh from 3 rooms away had a diagnostic weight. Honestly, if this were monetized, they'd be the youngest consultant in the building. The angle of someone's back turned toward the counter after a certain kind of phone call. They had a whole vocabulary for that, and nobody taught it to them. Stopped asking for things at inconvenient moments. Stopped pushing back on decisions that felt unfair, because pushing back changed the air. And changing the air had a cost they'd paid enough times to stop paying. The kid who never said anything in the locker room when something bothered him, who laughed it off every time, who every coach described as low maintenance, great attitude, never any trouble. That kid wasn't unbothered. He was calculating. He'd just gotten fast enough at it that it looked like a personality. By 12, it was running automatically. Below conscious thought, like breathing, except breathing doesn't require you to monitor everyone else's oxygen levels simultaneously. And the worst part? This is the thing everyone praised. So mature. Never causes any problems. The easy one. Their nervous system filed that directly. Being easy is how I stay safe here. And they got better at it every year. Number 2, the costume. At some point, what was survival became a costume. The agreeable one, the low-maintenance one, the one who never needs anything, always has it together, laughs things off, handles it. Here's how specific the costume got. They developed a particular face for bad news. Calm, slightly nodding, emotionally contained, because visible distress had consequences they'd already cataloged and weren't planning to repeat. They front-loaded every question. This is probably too much to ask, but delivered before you could say no. So the asking landed smaller, the potential rejection softer, the relationship stayed clean. Strategic pre-apology as conversational technology. Silicon Valley's trying to catch up. Harder than it sounds, which, to be clear, is not a skill you want a child to have mastered. They were 9, emotionally regulating like a middle manager with a caffeine dependency. Some kids were learning long division. They were learning emotional risk management, and everyone in the room thought, what a great kid. They weren't seeing maturity. They were seeing adaptation. They stayed late to help clean up. Not out of enthusiasm, but because it put them on the right side of the emotional ledger. And on the right side felt safer than the alternative. Nobody asked them to keep a ledger, and yet somehow they're balancing emotional spreadsheets no one else can see. If you have someone in your life right now who never argues, never pushes back, never seems to have strong opinions about anything, you might think, finally, a reasonable person. Their internal accounting system is running the same kind calculation in real time. It's working. Keep going. And they will until it starts costing them something. Number 3, what got swallowed? This is where it stops looking like a personality and starts costing them something. What you observed, agreeable, contained, easy, was the costume. Underneath it was everything that got assessed as a liability and quietly filed away. Opinions that never surfaced because the timing was never right. And eventually they stopped generating opinions that required timing. Preferences overridden enough times, gently, reasonably, without drama, until having a preference started to feel like a weight they were placing on everyone else. And the kindest thing they could do was stop having them. Anger that arrived, got evaluated, got filed under not right now. Not right now became never. A truly efficient filing system. Terrible long-term reviews. Never became, I'm actually a pretty chill person. I don't really get angry. They believed that by 15. They still believe it now. Which, to be fair, is impressive. Completely wrong, but impressive. Pause for a second. This is where most people recognize themselves. Yeah, this is the part where you stop scrolling. That's not calm. That's a system that never got permission to express anything. Music they didn't admit to liking. Friends they didn't bring home because they couldn't predict how the introduction would land. Grief processed alone, quietly, at a volume that wouldn't shift the weather in the house. Dreams they stopped talking about, because visible things can be responded to, and responses can go wrong. And wrong responses change everything. And changing everything was the one thing they'd spent years learning to prevent. There's no single dramatic moment where they decide to stop being themselves. It happens the way water cuts stone. The same small accommodation repeated until the original shape is gone and nobody remembers it being any different, including them. Every day, the same question running quietly. Is this safe to take up space with? And every day, for enormous chunks of who they actually were, the answer came back the same. Not really. Put it back. Number 4, who they became. Fast forward 20 years. Nothing looks wrong. That's the problem. They hold jobs, maintain friendships, show up on time. They remember everyone's coffee order. They're the first to offer help and the last to ask for it. By every external measure, they're completely fine. Put them in front of a restaurant menu, a harmless social activity. Unless you've been training for it since childhood, what do you feel like? That question shouldn't require a full internal committee meeting. And yet, somehow, we've got a board of directors, legal review, and risk assessment involved. The pause is too long. They're running the numbers. What does everyone else want? What won't make the table adjust? What is the least disruptive option? The calculation is automatic, faster than thought. It's the same process they ran at age 9 on whether to mention that something was wrong, just with more pasta and slightly better lighting. Not because they don't know what they want, because they've never practiced wanting anything out loud. You can't choose what you want if you were trained not to want anything. Not exactly a strong decision-making framework. They have thin data on what they actually like. Liking things was never the primary task. Being easy was. Everything else got deprioritized for so long that it stopped generating a clear signal. Psychologists call this identity diffusion. Not a diagnosis, a fragmented, underdeveloped sense of self. Difficulty articulating preferences, values, a direction. A background hum of purposelessness that's genuinely hard to explain to someone who just says, well, what do you want? The adult version sounds like, I'm flexible, whatever works for everyone. I don't really have strong opinions. I feel like something's missing, but I can't put my finger on it. Yeah, it's you. Slightly important detail. In their closest relationships, this looks like chronic accommodation that slowly curdles into resentment with no identifiable cause. They did everything right and still ended up feeling like a stranger to themselves, which is honestly very on brand. When someone finally offers them genuine, uncomplicated acceptance. You can be difficult. You can have opinions. You can take up space. They don't know what to do with it. The threat assessment system has no category for safe. It just keeps running. Some part of them is waiting for the fine print because love without conditions is a concept they understand intellectually and have almost no lived experience of. Number 5, what's actually true. Here's the thing nobody ever said to the easy child. At any age, the real self went underground. It did not disappear. It's just been waiting for you to notice it again. It's there in the feeling you can't explain, the preference you don't quite trust, the opinion that sits in your chest for a moment before you swallow it back down out of pure habit. You spent years being what the room needed. You got very good at it. That made sense when it was the only option available to you. It is not the only option available to you now. You're allowed to be harder to accommodate. The world will survive. Barely, but it will. You're allowed to push back, to take up space, to want something out loud without front-loading with an apology for the wanting. The threat assessment's going to keep you running for a while. That's not a character flaw. That's a nervous system doing exactly what it was trained to do. You don't fix it by deciding to stop. You fix it by giving it enough evidence, slowly, that the room doesn't collapse when you're honest in it. Start small. Say what you actually want for dinner. Let someone adjust. Notice that the adjustment didn't cost what you thought it would. That's the data your nervous system never got. You're not behind, you're just collecting it late. Those 5 things, the threat assessment, the costume, the swallowed preferences, the running calculations, the fine print, weren't personality traits. They were survival strategies, and you don't have to keep using them anymore. The character was the costume, and underneath it, you were always there.